This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libya's government of national accord declares a nationwide ceasefire. UN human rights officials meet Mali's ousted president Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and other detainees. Plus, we look at how the coronavirus pandemic has changed everyday life on the African continent. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua. Also coming up, in business, Nigeria introduces measures to cushion its banks as bad debts rise. We begin in Libya, where the UN-backed government has announced a nationwide ceasefire. There has been no immediate response from the eastern-based Libyan National Army or its military commander, Khalifa Haftar. The Speaker of the Eastern Parliament, Aguila Saleh, has echoed the announcement by the Government of National Accord. Although the Parliament is allied to Haftar, it's appealing for an end to hostilities. The truce includes the demilitarization of the areas of Sirte and Al-Jufra. The GNA has called for the end to an oil blockade imposed by Haftar's forces earlier this year. It also called for parliamentary and presidential elections to be held in March next year. The ceasefire comes amid international pressure and fears of a new escalation in the conflict. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has welcomed the ceasefire. Well, for more on this story, we're now joined live by CGTN correspondent Adel Mahroui with more on the unfolding political events in Libya. He joins us live from Cairo. Thank you, Adel, for joining us. Just tell us more about this surprise announcement.
Definitely a big surprise, because in the past weeks, we've been seeing both the Government of National Accord and the Libyan National Army, the two rival forces, have been massing up their arms and gathering their troops on the decisive line of Sirte and Al-Jufra, the strategic city where Haftar has been gaining control of, and the Government of National Accord has been saying it will enter and it wants Haftar to retreat for it. So the situation has entirely shifted to an acceptance to the current territorial gains for both sides, as earlier suggested by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The agreement, as you've mentioned briefly, it does say that they want a resumption, both the parliament and the Government of National Accord. They want a resumption in the oil production. The revenues of the oil production will go to an independent bank account that neither parties will enjoy unless there is a political settlement. So that's the very crucial factor here, paving the road for elections in March, as you've mentioned. And both want Sirte to be an armless, or at least, if it is protected by security force, it will be a collective security force that represent everyone in Libya, and therefore no one has actual arms or tendencies to control this city toward either side. The parliament suggests that this city should be the base for the next presidential council.
And Adel, there has been pressure on both sides to cease hostilities. What has informed the change of heart, and also what can we expect now going forward?
Regional players have been the key for that. The resources of the country that have been dried out mainly because the cease of oil production has harmed everyone. And that's the crucial part where both want to see immediately proceeding. The national oil company has said that it will start immediately to produce oil and export it. But it wants all armed forces controlling these oil fields to get away or move away so that the production can move regularly. The coronavirus pandemic that has also hit the country at its worst healthcare system and facilities, all of this has accumulated the benefit that no one really would enjoy any more gains with the war continuing, and it's a time for this civil war to stop and look for the future of Libya.
And finally, Adele, as we mentioned earlier, the President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has welcomed the declaration of a ceasefire. What more can you tell us about Egypt's reaction? And is there any word at this time on Turkey's position?
So this agreement would not have come to the light without Egypt, Turkey, and appears so also Qatar. Why? Because basically during the past week, we've seen the Egyptian chief of military intelligence go to Haftar to meet him in Libya for the first announced of such a gathering between the two. On the other hand, we also seen the defense minister of Qatar and defense officials from Turkey going to hold meetings with the government of national accord on the same week, which appears to be a finalization to the agreement that has just come to light. What makes it more so appears to be supported by these three nations, and of course the bigger international powers that supports them, is that this statement declared from the government of national accord and from the Libyan Eastern Parliament, they both have almost identical points that they want to see for the next roadmap. Egypt believes this is a great success. President Sisi was among the first to congratulate Libya on this declaration of a ceasefire. They will be pushing these regional powers, Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Russia, and all international powers concerned with Libya. They will be pushing both parties forward for negotiations, political talk. 5+5 military meetings in Geneva that has been led by the UN is a clearly prime task for them to disarm the militias, to control, have a unified military and police power in Libya, and pave the road for elections next year.
All right, Adele, thank you very much for that. CGTN's Adele Mahroui joining us live there from Cairo. Now, United Nations human rights officials have met with Mali's ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The UN peacekeeping mission in Mali on Twitter said a team was granted access to Keïta and other detainees. The UN mission has not provided details on what was discussed or the condition of the captives. There has been no word from Keïta since he dissolved parliament and resigned after being detained at gunpoint by military mutineers. But an ally of Keïta said the junta has released 2 senior government officials detained during the coup. International and regional powers have expressed dismay at the coup, fearing it could further destabilize the country and the entire Sahel region. Meanwhile, the Economic Community of West African States says it plans on sending a delegation to Mali. The move aims to reverse a military takeover that has led to the ouster of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. ECOWAS has been trying to block the coup-driven regime change. CGTN's Daniela Pearson now reports.
Army Colonel Assimi Goïta has presented himself as head of the military group that ousted Mali's president. Residents in the capital Bamako have expressed widespread support for the coup. A spokesperson of the military group has urged the public to return to work and continue as normal. The coup has been met with harsh criticism from the 15-member regional bloc ECOWAS. The Economic Community of West African States has been convening over the situation and suspended Mali's membership. The regional body also closed off borders with Mali and halted financial flows.
The closure of borders already called for by ECOWAS should be our first line of action. We need to isolate series of sanctions regimes that can create and sustain sufficient pressure on the military to force a return to constitutional governance.
An opposition coalition called M5RFP has joined the leaders of the coup in rejecting ECOWAS's position. Leaders attending the ECOWAS Emergency Summit say the political upheaval in Mali could destabilize the entire region. In July, a delegation from the bloc failed to broker an agreement between President Keïta and the opposition, who were leading large-scale protests against the government.
A politically stable Mali is paramount and crucial to the stability of the sub-region. ECOWAS, the African Union, and the United Nations should not stand by while the situation deteriorates.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari is urging the international community to continue condemning the military mutiny.
Military involvement in governance, in whatever guise, is an aberration that has no place in managing the business of government that suspends the Constitution and, with it, democratic institutions. It is time for the unconstitutional authority in Mali to act responsibly and do the needful by heeding to the above recommendations.
The coup has fueled concerns it could disrupt a military campaign against jihadists linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Terror groups have been operating in northern and central Mali, as well as West Africa's wider Sahel region. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
On to Mauritius now, where the bow of the Japanese vessel MV Wakashio has been towed out to sea for disposal. Experts and government authorities have been giving insights to the events leading up to this point. These events include the grounding of the ship and a subsequent oil leak after the carrier split in two. Officials have also been issuing information surrounding the claims and compensation process. Meanwhile, cleanup efforts are still ongoing, with experts expressing concern for the fragile marine environment. The bulk carrier ran aground on the 25th of July on the southern coast of Mauritius and started leaking heavy oil and diesel following severe weather conditions. At least 1,000 tons of fuel leaked from the wreck, while more than 3,000 tons of fuel was transferred to the shore. Well, to China now, where President Xi Jinping has wrapped up a visit to flood-ravaged eastern region of the country. He spent 4 days in Anhui province, one of the hardest hit areas. He ordered authorities to step up flood control measures and ensure that the food supply chain remains secure.
The first stop of President Xi's trip to Anhui province was the Wangjiaba Dam, which is located along the boundary of the upper and middle reaches of the Huaihe River. The reservoir opened all its sluice gates on July the 20th, the first time in 13 years, to ease pressure on the river and prevent extensive damage. Xi said the flood control system should be further improved to prevent massive losses. He also met with residents to find out more about disaster control, prevention, and relief work in the area.
The Chinese nation has been fighting all kinds of disasters for thousands of years. We have myths and legends about characters like Yugong moving mountains and Dayu taming floods. We will continue to fight. We must fight for better harmony between man and nature, instead of going against its will. We must abide by and know the law of nature. At the same time, we must strengthen our capacity to fend off disasters.
President Xi also visited an ecological wetland, which is designated as a flood storage area. He underscored the importance of environmental protection and poverty eradication. He also met with soldiers fighting the floods.
I would like to extend my most sincere greetings to all the comrades who are fighting on the front line of flood containment and rescue.
He also visited a local steel group to learn about the company's business operations. He stressed the significance of reform in state-owned enterprises as well as innovation in technology, saying they're necessary to increase competitiveness. The president also said strengthening local markets would ensure the success of the country's strategy in pursuing long-term sustainable development. He also stressed the importance of implementing reforms and opening up, as well as high-quality development. Chuck Tintes, CGTN.
To some positive news coming from Africa now, the continent has begun flattening the COVID-19 curve. That is according to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The Public Health Agency has attributed the developments to measures like mask wearing and social distancing. And with this trend, pressure is now building to reopen schools. The head of the Africa CDC, John Nkengasong, has warned that countries should wait until infections have declined substantially. The spread of the outbreak was slow in Africa in the early stages, but the rate of infection has gradually accelerated in the past few months. Countries like South Africa have recorded more than 1 million COVID-19 cases. Some experts also say low levels of testing in many countries also means infection rates are likely to be higher than reported. Now to our series on how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed how we live. In Egypt, all passengers using public transport are required to wear face masks and use other anti-epidemic measures. But changing the habits of millions poses a great challenge for people and authorities who are trying to impose these safety measures. CGTN's Adel Mahroui tells us more.
59-year-old Awadallah Al-Attar has been the chief of the biggest metro station in Egypt since 1992. At first, the station was named after former President Hosni Mubarak, but after the 2011 uprising, its name changed to El Shuhada, an Arabic word meaning martyrs. He has seen the facility undergo tremendous changes, and now the COVID-19 pandemic has even made more changes.
Under normal circumstances, we are responsible for the lives of the people who use the metro. We are taking additional care now because of the pandemic. At night, all trains, stations and workshops get disinfected. And in the morning, we file a video report to our superiors so that everyone ensures the process is up to the required standards.
The disinfection processes have added a lot to the metro workers' daily workload. Yet, that's the least challenging role brought about by the pandemic. They must ensure all passengers put their face masks. That's difficult to implement because many Egyptians are not used to doing so. Every minute, the station's speakers remind passengers of the measures they have to follow. Yet many still try to avoid wearing the masks.
Our public relations staff are utilizing all possible means to remind the passengers of the measures they need to follow. A passenger should listen to the audio instructions once they enter the station. If someone goes through the security gates, the Metro Police will follow up with the passengers. If the passengers say they have no face masks, we tell them to buy from the ticket office. If they refuse, the police will file a violation report.
In Egypt, people who don't wear masks aboard public transport could pay fines up to $250. That's more than 2 months' salary for an average Egyptian. It is almost impossible to ensure that all passengers abide by the new health measures all the way through their commute. Awadallah knows that some passengers will take their masks off once they walk past his checkpoint. But with only 2 weeks left before he retires, he's making sure that he's doing his part.
Up to 3 million passengers could cluster daily in the trains of the underground and stations. That poses great risk for Egypt under the COVID-19 pandemic. That's why the safety of this mean of transportation could greatly reflect on the health safety of the entire country. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Let's take you to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where musicians have resumed performances in the capital, Kinshasa, after authorities eased COVID-19 restrictions. One of the country's popular music bands, TPOK Jazz, has been rehearsing ahead of a major concert this month. Chris Ochamringa now reports.
I'm at a renowned entertainment venue in Kinshasa known as 1, 2, 3 or 1, 2, 3. This is the home of a popular Congolese Rumba band, TPOK Jazz. It was founded in 1956 by the legendary Congolese musician Franco Luambo Makiadi, now deceased. The group's music was loved across Africa in the 1970s and 80s. It's still popular among the older folks in the DRC and other African countries. The group's revenues sharply dwindled in March after the government banned music concerts to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. But they are now back after the easing of restrictions. Wearing of masks has become the new normal for some of them while performing, but often only under their chin, as covering their faces makes singing too difficult. But for the audiences that keep coming here to attend music concerts every weekend in one of Africa's entertainment capitals, they'll have to wear them properly by covering their nose and mouth when out enjoying themselves. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let's take a short break now. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live. Nigeria introduces measures to cushion its banks as bad debts rise.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria is introducing a raft of measures to try and cushion commercial banks from the rising rate of loan defaulting. The banks are facing $47 billion worth of bad debt, and there's concern that without drastic steps, some might collapse. Correspondent Phil Ihaza now reports from Nigeria's capital, Abuja.
The pandemic has hit businesses in Nigeria hard. Thousands have defaulted in repaying their loans due to COVID-19, leaving commercial banks struggling to cope. Back in April, the Central Bank of Nigeria promised to do its best to help businesses repay their outstanding debts.
We make funds available to them in the health sector, in the small and medium enterprises, in the manufacturing sector, in the agri sector, make funds available to them as quickly as possible and at concessionary rates, and also give those even who have existing loans in the banks an opportunity to restructure their loans and push forward their repayments. Then it should be easy for us to get businesses back alive.
There has since been a small improvement. The ratio of bad loans declined from 6.6% in April to 6.4% in June. But as of last month, over 35,000 credit facilities worth $47 billion are still being owed by businesses across the country. And nearly half of the entire debt is owed by businesses in the oil and gas sector. Crude oil is Nigeria's #1 earner.
Bank exposure to small businesses in Nigeria is very low. Most facilities are given to quote and unquote the big boys, most of which are in oil and gas. So if you want to get your money back, the policy should be targeted towards those that have huge burden, not those that have less burden. In the case of pandemic, nobody planned for that. It changed the trend, it changed the fundamentals. Nobody knew what was going to happen tomorrow. But the good news is the price have started to climb, but gradually. But when they don't make bank repayment a priority, I'm sorry, the bank will still have to suffer.
The central bank has temporarily suspended loan interest and repayment on principal debts of up to 1/3 of the entire credit facility owed by businesses so far. But experts say interventions may only be a short-term solution to recovering the huge debts owed by various businesses in the country.
What should be done is for banks to find the equity capital of such businesses and take over such businesses. Bank can create an arm that is in oil and gas, and they use part of their investment they have. So it may be non-interest of some sort. The world is actually moving towards non-interest, if you ask me.
In 2005, the central bank had to step in to cut down and consolidate most of the country's troubled commercial banks from about 90 to 25, and just 22 of them are now in operation.
To revamp Africa's largest economy and free commercial banks from a huge debt burden, experts say the country may need to hastily diversify from crude oil sales and develop its infrastructure to encourage more manufacturing and processing of its abundant raw materials. This, they say, will boost the revenue of businesses and prevent the economy from slipping into recession. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
On to the sports now, starting with football, where Inter Milan is set to face Sevilla in their first ever meetup in a European competition. Inter, who are three-time UEFA Cup winners, finished second in the Serie A, their best finish since 2011.